You don't connect with an avoidant by sending more texts. You don't connect by explaining yourself better, loving harder, or proving you're different. And if you've been trying to figure out the perfect message that will finally make them open up, respond faster, or lean closer instead of pulling away, this is where everything shifts. Because texting an avoidant is not about saying more, it's about creating safety in a space where they expect pressure. It's about becoming calm where they expect chaos. It's about connection without demand. And if you understand this, you stop chasing replies and you start building emotional gravity. The first mistake most people make when texting an avoidant is texting from anxiety instead of stability. When they don't respond quickly, your nervous system reacts, your mind starts racing. You reread the last message. You wonder if you said too much. You wonder if they're losing interest. And before you even realize it, you send another message to close the gap between you and that uncomfortable silence. But to an avoidant, that second text doesn't feel like care. It feels like pressure. It feels like expectation. It feels like someone stepping closer when they already needed space. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional demand, even when it's subtle. A simple, "Are you okay?" can translate internally to, "You owe me reassurance." A "Why are you distant?" can translate to, "I'm about to be controlled." And they shut down, not because they don't care, but because their nervous system reads closeness as risk. So if you truly want to use text to connect with an avoidant, the first shift is internal. You regulate before you send. You breathe before you react. You allow space to exist without trying to fix it. Instead of double texting, you pause. Instead of demanding clarity, you offer calm. Instead of escalating emotion, you keep your energy steady. When they feel no emotional chase, no urgency pulling at them, something surprising happens. They relax, because for once, closeness doesn't feel like being cornered. It feels optional, and optional closeness is the only kind they can step into freely. An avoidant does not fall for intensity. They fall for emotional safety. And emotional safety through text is created in small, subtle ways. It's in the tone. It's in the pacing. It's in what you don't say. Long emotional paragraphs early on can overwhelm them. Deep vulnerability too fast can feel like responsibility they didn't agree to hold. Interrogating questions about feelings can feel like an emotional spotlight they aren't ready for. Instead, connection builds through lightness and consistency. A simple message sharing something that reminded you of them without attaching expectation. A calm check-in that doesn't demand a response timeline. A playful observation instead of a heavy emotional discussion. When your texts say, "I enjoy you," instead of "I need you," they breathe differently. When your energy says, "I'm good with or without immediate validation," they don't feel trapped. Safety is built when they know responding is a choice, not a requirement. And here's the truth that might be hard to hear. The more emotionally self-contained you are, the more curious they become, because they're used to intensity. They're used to people wanting more than they can give. But when you show up grounded, warm, but not consuming, you become different. You become someone who feels like peace instead of pressure. If you want an avoidant to slowly open up through text, stop asking them how they feel and start inviting them to share without force. Emotional depth must be gradual. Instead of "What are we?" you build connection through shared experiences and small disclosures. Instead of "Why don't you talk about your past?" you create conversations around interests, ideas, humor, daily life. Avoidants open like locked doors, not open windows. They need repeated proof that emotional expression won't cost them independence. So when they share something small, you don't overreact. When they reveal something personal, you don't amplify it into a dramatic moment. You respond calmly, warmly, steadily. That steadiness teaches their nervous system that vulnerability doesn't lead to engulfment. Texting becomes a safe bridge instead of an emotional battlefield. And over time, those one-word replies begin to stretch. The conversations begin to last longer. The gaps between messages shorten, not because you chased it, but because you allowed it. Emotional safety is repetition without pressure. It's presence without demand. It's connection that feels like a soft place to land instead of a contract to sign. There will be moments when the texting feels perfect. The rhythm flows. The laughter is easy. The replies are quick. You start to feel hopeful. And then suddenly, they pull back. The responses slow down. The tone becomes neutral. Maybe they disappear for a day or two. This is the point where most connections collapse, because most people react. They confront, they accuse, they panic. But when an avoidant pulls back after closeness, it's rarely about losing interest. It's about emotional regulation. Intimacy triggers their fear of losing autonomy. The closer they feel, the more their system whispers that they're about to be trapped. So they create distance to restore balance. If you respond to that distance with emotional escalation, you confirm their fear. But if you respond with calm understanding, you break the pattern. A simple, grounded message that leaves room. Or even better, giving space without resentment. No passive-aggressive tone. No guilt. No dramatic goodbye energy. Just steadiness. When they sense that closeness with you does not mean losing themselves, they slowly come back. And when they come back to someone who didn't chase, didn't collapse, didn't explode, respect begins to grow. Attraction deepens. Trust forms quietly. Because connection with an avoidant is not built through emotional intensity. It is built through emotional containment. And when you master that through something as simple as text, you stop feeling powerless. You stop staring at your phone waiting to feel chosen. Instead, you become the grounded energy that feels safe enough for them to step toward. And that is how you truly use text to connect with an avoidant. And this is where your power deepens. Because once you understand that connection with an avoidant is built through containment, the next shift is even more subtle. You stop trying to secure the bond through constant communication. You start allowing silence to exist without assigning it meaning. Silence is the space where most anxious energy explodes. It's where doubt grows teeth. It's where you start rewriting the story in your head. But to an avoidant, silence is not abandonment. Silence is regulation. Silence is how they return to themselves when closeness starts to feel overwhelming. So when they leave you on read, the worst thing you can do is interpret it as rejection. The worst thing you can do is send a follow-up that carries wounded energy. Did I do something? Why are you ignoring me? I guess you're not interested. Those messages don't create connection. They create emotional obligation. And obligation feels heavy to someone who already fears being emotionally responsible for another person's stability. Instead, you let the silence breathe. You return to your own life. You ground yourself in something real, outside of the phone screen. And when you respond, you do it from steadiness, not fear. Because when they come back and feel that you didn't crumble in the quiet, something inside them relaxes. They begin to see you as safe. Not because you tolerate distance endlessly, but because you don't weaponize it. Now let's talk about frequency. Text too much and they suffocate. Text too little and the connection fades. The balance is not about strategy. It's about attunement. An avoidant often communicates in waves. There are moments of warmth and moments of retreat. If you match their warm moments with warmth, but don't chase during their retreat, you create rhythm instead of friction. The mistake is overcompensating. When they pull back slightly, you increase effort. When they respond briefly, you send longer messages. When they take hours, you send paragraphs. This creates imbalance. Instead, mirror the energy without punishing them. If they send a short message, keep it light. If they engage deeply, meet them there. If they slow down, allow space without dramatic withdrawal. Consistency does not mean constant. It means stable presence. It means your tone doesn't swing wildly depending on how fast they reply. Avoidants are extremely sensitive to emotional volatility. If they sense that your mood depends on their texting behavior, they feel pressure. But if they sense that your emotional state is steady, regardless of response time, trust builds slowly, because now they are not carrying the weight of your regulation, and that changes everything. There will also be moments when conflict enters through text. Maybe something they said hurt you. Maybe they disappeared longer than usual. Maybe you feel unseen. This is where connection is either strengthened or destroyed. If you confront with accusation, they retreat. If you explode emotionally, they shut down. But if you communicate calmly and clearly, something rare happens. You show them that conflict does not equal chaos. Instead of, "You always do this," you say, "When there's long silence, I feel disconnected. I just want clarity." Notice the difference. One blames, one expresses. Avoidants expect emotional ambushes. They expect arguments that escalate into demands. When you speak in grounded statements without attacking their character, you reduce their instinct to flee. And then, the most important part, you give them time to process. Do not demand immediate resolution. Do not flood their phone with follow-ups if they take hours to respond. Processing is slow for them. Emotions feel heavy. But if you allow space after expressing yourself, you show strength instead of desperation. And that strength is deeply attractive to someone who fears emotional storms. Another powerful way to connect through text is appreciation without intensity. Avoidants often carry silent fears of being inadequate. They fear being criticized. They fear not meeting expectations. So when your messages consistently highlight what you value about them without attaching pressure, it builds something profound. A simple acknowledgement of their effort, appreciation for their consistency, recognition of something thoughtful they did, not exaggerated praise, not emotional dependency, just grounded appreciation. When they feel seen without being demanded from, they soften because now connection feels affirming instead of draining. Many avoidants grew up associating closeness with criticism or obligation. So when your words feel warm but not consuming, it rewires something small inside them. They begin to associate you with safety instead of stress. And that shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens through repetition, through tone, through steadiness, through showing them that connection with you does not mean losing themselves. And finally, understand this deeply. You cannot text your way into changing someone's attachment style. No perfect message can heal wounds they are not willing to face. Texting can build safety, it can create openness, it can encourage closeness, but it cannot force transformation. If you find yourself constantly calculating what to say, constantly shrinking your needs to keep them comfortable, constantly overfunctioning to maintain connection, pause. Connection should not feel like walking on glass. The goal is not to become smaller, so they stay. The goal is to remain secure while inviting them closer. If they continue to retreat despite your steadiness, despite your emotional regulation, despite your balanced communication, then the truth becomes clear. Connection requires participation from both sides. Using text to connect with an avoidant is about becoming calm, grounded, emotionally contained. It is not about abandoning your own needs. When you show up secure, you give them the opportunity to meet you there. And if they choose not to, you still remain whole. That is the real power, because the most attractive energy to an avoidant is not pursuit. It is stability. It is someone who can love without clinging, express without attacking, and stay steady in silence. When your texts carry that energy, you stop trying to control the outcome. You start embodying connection itself. And whether they lean in slowly or not, you no longer lose yourself in the process. And when you reach this level of steadiness, something unexpected begins to happen inside you. You stop obsessing over what to send next, and you start becoming more intentional about why you're sending it. Because texting an avoidant is not about keeping conversation alive at all costs. It's about creating an emotional environment where both of you can breathe. This is where emotional curiosity becomes powerful. Instead of texting to get reassurance, you text to share presence. Instead of fishing for validation, you offer lightness. A simple observation about your day, a thought that made you smile, a shared memory that doesn't demand reliving it intensely. Curiosity feels different than pursuit. Curiosity says, I wonder what you think about this. Pursuit says, I need to know how you feel about me. Avoidants lean toward curiosity because it feels open-ended. It doesn't trap them in emotional performance. And when they respond, even briefly, you don't interrogate the depth of it. You let it exist as it is. That restraint communicates confidence. It tells them you're not measuring the relationship by the length of a text bubble, you're allowing connection to unfold naturally. And when they sense that they're not being evaluated constantly, they begin to invest more freely. There's also something crucial you must understand about emotional timing. With an avoidant, depth must be layered, not dropped all at once. If you suddenly send a heavy message about your fears, your expectations, or the future of the connection without gradual buildup, it can feel like emotional weight they didn't prepare to carry. It's not that they don't care. It's that intensity activates their instinct to protect their independence. So instead of diving deep abruptly, you build intimacy in micro moments. A slightly more personal thought than usual. A small vulnerability that doesn't demand fixing. A gentle reflection instead of a dramatic confession. You watch how they respond. If they lean in, you take one step further. If they stay neutral, you don't escalate. This pacing creates trust. It shows that you are emotionally aware. Avoidants often fear being engulfed by someone else's emotional world. When you demonstrate that you can reveal yourself without overwhelming them, they begin to lower their guard. And in those quiet exchanges, something sacred forms, not explosive passion, not chaotic intensity, but steady attachment, the kind that grows slowly and roots deeply. Now let's talk about initiation. If you are always the one texting first, always the one reviving the conversation, always the one sending good morning and good night messages, you may unintentionally train them to lean back while you lean forward. And over time, that imbalance creates resentment inside you. So if you want real connection, you must allow space for them to initiate. Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as recalibration. You pull back slightly. You stop filling every silence. You allow them the opportunity to feel your absence in a healthy way. Avoidants often don't recognize value until there is space to notice it. When you constantly provide emotional availability without pause, they can unconsciously take it for granted. But when your energy becomes balanced, when you are present yet not overextending, they begin to step forward more. And when they do initiate, you reinforce it gently. You respond warmly. You show appreciation for their effort without exaggerating it. This teaches their nervous system that reaching out leads to connection, not pressure. It builds positive association with vulnerability, and slowly, initiation becomes more natural for them. There will also be moments after emotional or physical closeness where their texting shifts noticeably. Maybe you shared something meaningful. Maybe you spent a day together that felt deeply connected. And then afterward, they become quieter. Shorter responses, longer gaps. This is not necessarily loss of interest. It is often emotional recalibration. Closeness activates fear. Intimacy reminds them of dependency, so they create distance to regain a sense of autonomy. If you panic during this phase, if you confront them with, "Why are you different now?" you intensify the cycle. But if you remain grounded, if you continue texting lightly without escalating the emotional temperature, you communicate safety, a simple message that keeps things normal. No heavy follow-up about what the closeness meant. No pressure to define it immediately. You allow the experience to breathe. And when they see that intimacy with you does not automatically lead to emotional entrapment, they begin to trust closeness more. Over time, those post-intimacy withdrawals become shorter. The distance decreases because you responded with stability instead of fear. But here is the most important truth of all. As you learn how to use text to connect with an avoidant, do not abandon yourself in the process. Emotional containment is powerful, but suppression is not. There is a difference between being secure and silencing your needs. If you constantly feel anxious, unseen, or unvalued, that matters. If you are always adjusting while they remain rigid, that matters. The goal of mastering communication is not to twist yourself into the least threatening version of you. It is to show up regulated, honest, and balanced. When you text from that place, you are not performing. You are expressing. And if they respond with effort, with growth, with gradual openness, then the connection evolves naturally. But if they remain distant despite your steadiness, if they avoid depth indefinitely, if they rely on you to carry all emotional weight, then the most loving thing you can do is acknowledge reality, because true connection requires two regulated nervous systems willing to meet in the middle. Texting can open the door, it can create warmth, it can build trust, but it cannot replace mutual effort. So as you apply these shifts, remember that your calm energy is not a strategy to win someone over. It is a reflection of your own emotional maturity. And whether they step forward fully or not, you remain grounded. You remain whole. You remain someone capable of loving without losing yourself. And that is the deepest form of connection anyone can offer. And when you truly accept that connection requires two willing nervous systems, you begin to approach texting with a different kind of strength. You no longer text to secure the bond. You text to express your authentic presence. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because an avoidant can feel when someone is texting from fear of loss versus texting from grounded interest. When your messages are fueled by anxiety, there's a hidden urgency in them. Even if the words look calm, the energy feels tight, and avoidants are highly attuned to that tension. It makes them brace. It makes them step back. But when your texts come from a centered place, when you've already soothed yourself before reaching out, the tone is softer, it's lighter, it carries an unspoken message. I enjoy you, but I am okay regardless. That energy feels safe. It feels non-demanding. And that safety is what allows an avoidant to lean closer without feeling like they're walking into emotional quicksand. There will be days when their responses feel dry, one-word replies, delayed reactions, conversations that seem to lose depth. This is where most people spiral internally. You start comparing how they texted before to how they're texting now. You search for hidden meaning. You assume disinterest. But often, dry texting from an avoidant is not rejection. It's emotional conservation. When they're overwhelmed, stressed, or processing something internally, their communication becomes minimal. Not because you don't matter, but because they retreat inward when life feels heavy. The key is not to overcompensate. Don't send 3 enthusiastic messages to revive energy. Don't confront them with frustration immediately. Instead, match the tone calmly. Keep it simple. If they're brief, you're brief. If they don't expand, you don't push, and then you return to your own life. You don't wait around hoping they'll suddenly transform mid-conversation. You maintain your rhythm. That consistency communicates emotional independence, and independence is something avoidants respect deeply. When they feel that you're not clinging to every text exchange as proof of connection, they relax, and ironically, that relaxation often leads them to re-engage more fully later. Now let's talk about vulnerability through text. Many people believe that opening up quickly builds intimacy faster, but with an avoidant, vulnerability must feel like an invitation, not an obligation. If you send a deeply emotional confession and then subconsciously wait for them to match it, they will feel pressure. They may even withdraw because they sense expectation. Instead, vulnerability should be self-contained. You share something meaningful, but you don't demand reciprocity immediately. You allow them to respond at their pace. If they acknowledge it briefly, you accept that. If they don't dive deep right away, you don't punish them with distance or sarcasm. Over time, as they witness that your vulnerability does not come with hidden contracts, they begin to mirror it slowly. Avoidants open in layers, and each layer requires proof that they won't be engulfed or judged. Your calm response to their small disclosures is what encourages the next one. When they share something slightly personal and you react with warmth instead of intensity, you reinforce safety, and that safety becomes the foundation of deeper emotional intimacy. Another powerful shift happens when you stop trying to decode every message for hidden meaning. Avoidants often communicate directly but minimally. They won't always use poetic language. They won't always send long affirmations. Their consistency is often quiet. They might check in casually. They might remember small details. They might send something random that made them think of you. These gestures may seem subtle compared to grand romantic expressions, but for an avoidant, they are significant. If you dismiss those small efforts because they're not dramatic enough, you miss the connection forming beneath the surface. Instead, acknowledge those moments. Respond warmly. Show that you see their effort, not with overwhelming praise, but with genuine appreciation. This reinforces that their way of expressing care is noticed, and when they feel understood rather than criticized for not being more expressive, they feel safer continuing to invest. And finally, there comes a moment where you realize that using text to connect with an avoidant is not about mastering technique. It's about mastering yourself. It's about regulating your fears before they become accusations. It's about choosing grounded communication over emotional reaction. It's about allowing connection to grow at a pace that feels steady instead of urgent. When you embody that energy, texting becomes simple. It becomes natural. It stops feeling like a strategy session and starts feeling like an extension of who you are. And if the avoidant in your life chooses to meet you halfway, something beautiful can grow. Slowly, quietly, securely. But if they don't, if they remain distant despite your balance and clarity, you will recognize it sooner without losing yourself in the process. Because the real transformation in this journey isn't just about connecting with them. It's about staying connected to you. It's about becoming someone who can offer warmth without overextending, express feelings without overwhelming, and allow space without collapsing into fear. When you reach that place, Texting no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like communication between two adults navigating closeness at their own pace. And whether that path leads to deeper intimacy or a respectful ending, you walk it with self-respect intact. That is the ultimate power in learning how to use text to connect with an avoidant.